Maryan, how are you?
I'm doing good, Jack. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Amazing. We're so excited to have you on and hear from you again. I know you were on the last session on Friday speaking to some of our candidates, and they loved the session. Johnny was there to lead that. So I guess from a quick recap, Johnny, what were the main takeaways and the bits that resonated with you and the feedback from the guys was?
No, it was incredible. I have to thank Maryan, obviously, because I think some of the guys going through the platform and learning what they're learning, having an opportunity to speak to somebody who's actually been an SDR and is now a successful customer success manager. And it was great for them to understand the journey of how you can go from an SDR and really climb up through the ranks. And yeah, I think for Maryan and myself, it was very almost nostalgic because, speaking about the SDR role again and sort of remembering where we started, it was really good. So I have to thank you again, Maryan, for like the 100th time. The guys really loved you. They appreciated it. And I can't wait to sort of see the impact that has on them for the rest of the course.
No, you're welcome. Well, it absolutely seems like the platform you guys have is great. And what I was saying really resonated with them and made sense, about, especially the talking about prospecting and some of the tasks that you guys have on the platform. So that was really interesting to hear. So thank
Amazing.
you.
Super. So yeah, I guess just for everyone listening in, we'd love just to take it back to where we met. We met at the Salesforce conference, but I would love to know, I guess, what resonated with yourself about Entertech, and I guess just tell the listeners how we met, really, just to set the scene.
Yeah, no. So I met Jack and Johnny at the off party of Salesforce World Tour London. So that was a really good event. I didn't manage to get to go to the event, but I think you guys did. And I met these guys at the after party that my company Capado was hosting. And, it was Jack who came directly to me, sort of introduced himself, told me what you guys do. So that was really cool. And what resonated for me was the fact that there's people like you helping people get into tech and, trying to become an SDR. I was an SDR, so that's what resonated with me. And one thing that I felt was really good is when I started my journey as an SDR, I went to a recruiter, and that was how I sort of got into being an SDR and into the tech world. I just feel like having a platform that you guys have, educating people, is just so beneficial, and will take people places rather than them trying to navigate the tech world and figuring out where they should start. So that's what resonated with me the most, and also you guys' energy and everything. So it seems like you guys have a great business platform. It seems like there's people who need it. So that's great.
No, and that's sort of amazing about it. Jack came up to me and he said, "I've met this really energetic, wonderful girl called Maryan," and I think that's what we're seeing a lot in the conversations we have. Right, we're connecting with people that remember what it's like to have started the journey as an SDR. And I think being able to help other people along the way and connecting with people that can recognize the struggles of that journey, and you sort of creating a community that, continues to add value to each other and sort of open doors. And of course, from that, we've got this podcast. So you know what I mean? So it's beautiful to see. Beautiful to see.
Awesome. And then just, I guess, going back to, completely agree with that, Jay, but going back to your path into the industry, would love to know how you came across the tech industry, how you got sort of snapped up by a recruiter, how that process looked like as being an SDR, and I guess why tech. And go back to your
so it's really an interesting story. Just to give some context for everyone, my name's Maryan. I'm 25. I grew up in South London, and when I originally was thinking about my career after uni, where I wanted to go into, what field, what do I want to be, I actually had no idea. And I think what I first thought was like, let me think of an industry. What industry do I want to really work in? And actually that came about earlier in my life when I was about 17 and I was in sixth form, and I was kind of in my first year of sixth form, knowing I wasn't doing well in A levels, and I was kind of struggling, and I felt like I needed some motivation, and my peers around me needed some motivation. And at that time I was in the student council, and they came up to me and was like, do you want to organize a talk, get someone in to inspire the students and just make them feel better that they're doing A levels and that they can achieve what they want to achieve. So I kind of had a mission to find someone that was inspiring, you know, an entrepreneur, someone that could tell their story, and tell us, you know, something exciting. So I reached out to this guy called Piers Daniel, who he was a sort of a tech entrepreneur, had his own tech business. I invited him to come to the school and talk to us about it, and it was very inspiring. He didn't go to uni, he set up his own business, and now it's really successful. So at the end of that session, he asked me to do work experience at his company for a month, and I was about 17. So wow. I was like, okay, this is cool. I get to figure out if tech industry is for me. So for a month I was working at this company, and it was really great. I got to see every week I was in a different department, finance, sales, you know, the actual techie people, tech support. So it was really great experience, and I think I sort of owe a lot to him and just give me that opportunity to do work experience, because I felt like that was the industry I've always wanted to be in. So when I was finishing my A-levels, I was like, I'm just going to take a general degree, because ultimately I know I want to be in tech, but let me get some skills that I can, you know, try and transfer. So I did a business with economics degree, very general, but also had that business element, which is good. And then when I graduated, maybe 6 to 8 months before graduating, I started applying to a whole host of jobs. So jobs related to economics and civil service. I even looked into recruitment, tech recruitment, and then slowly SDR. So that was me applying on my own, and I found that really difficult, applying on my own. No support, no CV support. Didn't know how to answer these questions in the interview process. So ultimately, it was kind of my last resort, going to a tech recruiter. And I found this great guy called Sam at one of these tech recruiters, and like he was amazing. Like I came across a few different tech recruiters, but he really supported me through the interview process, finding the right place, navigating whether I wanted to be an SDR or a tech recruiter. And then through the journey and taking interviews, I realized I don't want to be a tech recruiter. It's not for me. And then ultimately fell into SDR, and this company came about, and it just really resonated with me, the culture, the tech, and you know, Sam helped me with the presentation, the questions that you typically get, why sales, why tech. So he helped me navigate that, and then so I know the importance of why, you know, working with people to try and land your first job is so important. And it's probably why I've resonated so much with you guys, because that's exactly what you guys are doing. So that's how I got into the SDR world. And then when I was there, I was an SDR for about 18 months, which I really enjoyed. There was a few ups and downs, and I'm sure we would talk about the ups and downs.
Yeah, we'll dive into them in a bit.
But that was the journey into being an SDR. So I think where I started was I decided what industry I wanted to be in, and that was tech. So for me, that I feel like that would be my first advice to anyone: would be decide which industry you want to be in, and then sort of look into roles around that.
Amazing. Did you know what an SDR was, or did you sort of come across the tech industry and then the recruiter sort of coached you into what an SDR was? Because I had quite a different experience when I was trying to get into the industry. I actually found the job on LinkedIn myself after having a terrible experience with a traditional recruiter.
Yeah.
So they basically said, here's the job spec. This is what you'll be doing. Literally, they didn't really explain the SDR role. Went for the first stage interview, went great. I built some really good rapport with the people. And then the second time they said, come back and do a presentation, but there was no support into what I should be really presenting and how it was going to work out. So actually, after 5 minutes, the guy just said, I'm going to stop you there. It was in person, it was before Zoom calls, and said, I can tell you're a great person, but you obviously haven't come prepared and you don't know what an SDR is or how to research companies, find leads. And that was quite a humbling experience, but that's why we find it's really beneficial to have a good understanding of what an SDR is before you're going to interview at the jobs.
No, I completely resonate with that. And I think that was my first I had a similar experience before I went to this recruiter when I was applying to SDR roles, because I wanted to, I had an idea. I wanted to get into sales. So I generally understood what sales was. I feel like I had a bit more understanding of what an inside sales rep or a business developer rep was, but not so much an SDR. So when I was applying on my own, I had the same experience. I wasn't prepared either. That's why I specifically went to a sales recruiter that had knowledge around the sales industry. He could break down things for me. So that's what resonated with me. This person knew what a SDR was, what, you know, finding leads, prospecting, everything to do with that. They sort of coached me in. So when I went through the interview process for that, I clearly sort of understood, yeah, that's what I wanted to do compared to the tech recruitment world, which is a completely different world. So yeah, no, it's interesting.
So, thank you so much. I'm sort of intrigued to sort of find out what happened before you met Sam, right? Who obviously was a great resource for yourself and sort of helped you break into the industry, because you mentioned you had a couple of different experiences before that didn't go quite so well. And I can imagine a few people out there are probably going through something similar. What are some of those experiences that you really didn't enjoy, and what did you do about them, or what advice can you give to people that may be experiencing the same thing right now?
So I think sort of the main questions that really tripped me up when I didn't know that they were going to ask these sort of questions was sort of the questions like, why tech? Why do you want to join the tech industry? Or why sales? What's motivating you to get into sales? And I'm just like, really good question that I just didn't really think about. Like, as a student, you're just like, I just want to get a job. You know, I just want to get a job. Do the job and work for this industry. And you don't really look behind it. But then they're asking you really serious questions about, you know, do you want to make money? Do you want to do X, Y, and Z? And as someone just fresh out of uni, probably, you know, has never really made that much money, getting asked that question is a bit like, yeah, of course I want to make money, but how do you how do you say that without like coming across like super cocky, like
for sure
some type of way? So those two questions really did trip me up. And just generally understanding like what is cold calling, like, you know, what is my expectations of prospecting. It's not going to be easy. Like I thought it was going to be easy, and I think when you come with that mentality, it's quite difficult for then the employee to be like, yeah, she's gonna get a rude awakening when she joins, because it's hard work, and you know, you've got to really enjoy it and have some creativity to get through some of the challenges of, you know, prospecting and, you know, just generally being an SDR.
I love that. And just a quick follow up on it, right? Because obviously I think a lot of sort of, especially people coming out of uni, they come across many different people who give them loads of different advice and sort of tries to point them loads of different directions. What made Sam stand out as an individual? Like, what was great about him that you felt like was really helpful to yourself? What qualities would you say these guys need to be looking for when they're speaking to potential recruiters or potential people that want to hire them, etc.?
So I think with Sam, he was very charismatic, you know, very personable, but also very honest, you know, like telling me like, this is not a right answer, and the reason why it's not a good answer is X, Y, and Z. So he was really, you could tell he really wanted to help me and get me a job. Like he wasn't just doing it so that he could get his, you know, commission and off like and we were working over a period of like months. It wasn't weeks, it was like a period of months where I was working with Sam. So you could tell he really did care about my journey, where I wanted to be, and really listen to me. So I think that was really important. And I think you need someone who is sort of a bit of your advocate, you know, you know, someone who can, you know, be behind you and tell you, you know, okay, I don't think this job is for you. We'll have it. You can try, go for the interview just for experience, but I just don't think this is for you. And I think he was really honest about that process. So that's what I really liked about him.
Love that. Thank you.
That's really refreshing actually to hear that. So shout out to Sam. I would say again, just, you know, when I was searching for jobs as well, the 1 year of experience in tech or sales sort of put me off, you know, maybe applying straight out of uni. So I would say to people listening, definitely apply for roles, SDR, BDR roles, even if you don't think you've got the the experience, because obviously you're taught on the job. Obviously here at Entertech we can help bridge that gap. But tell me, what was it like ramping up and joining as
Oh my
an
gosh,
SDR for your first, I guess, role straight out of university?
So you know what, it was a big adjustment because I didn't realize the ramp up was very quick. You know, now that I'm a bit of a professional and I've jumped through jobs, the ramp up's like a few 3 to 4 months, whereas in my being an SDR, the ramp up was a matter of weeks. It was like, you know, you're learning the product, the service within a matter of weeks. You're doing calls within your second, third week. It's very intense. So I found that, you know, I found that hard. My first 4 weeks, I was like, do I quit? Do I quit? Because it was really intense. And at the time I was one of there was another guy, so there was just 2 of us in the SDR team. So it was really challenging because, you know, at the time he's sort of my buddy, but sort of a bit of a manager in the team. So I felt a bit shy to ask him questions. Lovely guy. I'm still friends with him now. But at the beginning, it was like approaching him I felt really, you know, uncomfortable. So that was difficult when you don't feel like you have a big team to support you. That was challenging. But I think for me, it was just the jump from learning this really technical product and service to then articulating it on a phone call in the second week. It was challenging. So a lot of work had to be put in after hours to really get my head around it. And, you know, my first call was probably terrible. Or like they sort of did mock-up sessions. So you'd go into a room with your manager and sort of talk about like, what is cloud? What is MAS? What do we do? What is Ubuntu? And you're just like, okay, articulating this is really difficult because they already know, they have an idea of what it is. So when they're hearing you say it back, at times they were brutally honest. And like I remember vividly one thing that they'll be brutally honest about was the way I was saying things. So it was, for example, ask, or the word ask, for example. So that someone came up to me, yep, you're saying this word wrong. And I'm like, am I? And then I was saying, because I was saying it from a South London perspective. Gonna ask you a question. Like that's how I was saying it. Gonna ask you a question. But he's like, that's not correct English. And I'm just like, damn, you're really nitpicking at you know, some serious stuff. So I felt a bit insecure when that happened. But then at the same time, I am speaking to customers. I understand, you know, that, but for me, it was intense because people are listening to you. They're looking at your pitch and they're nitpicking at stuff. So that was that was the challenging part. But I think eventually got better when more people joined the SDR team. You know, and I was telling Johnny in the last call, teamwork really, that's what changed my experience as an SDR. The amount of people that joined.
No, I have to add on to that. Honestly, as you're talking about ramping up, and I completely agree, teamwork is a massive, massive factor. But I definitely vividly remember as well, I'd worked at a car factory for 11 months, and before that was uni, right? And your articulation and what you said, it was never really a problem. There was never really anybody there to be like, speak like this or speak like that. So I remember I started, and mine, imagine, was in cybersecurity as well. So I have no idea what some of these words mean, just flying past my head. And then the challenge of having to articulate that on the phone and try to convince a professional who's worked in the industry for 10, 15 years to get on a meeting with you was horrible. And I did ask myself the same question, like, do I really belong here? Do you know what I mean? I was like, what is this world? But I think what I wanted to touch on was, I'm glad you had Sam giving you the right advice in terms of what type of companies to pick, right? Because your first role as an SDR can really determine your perception of sales and your perception of the SDR sort of industry and world itself. Because luckily I had an environment where there was quite a robust system in place from a training perspective and an onboarding perspective. So everything was like done in quite an orderly manner. But I've heard horror stories too, where you go in and you get given a script, and the next week you just start calling, and that can be really challenging and it can put people off. some people have started an SDR role and they realize, actually, no, I don't want to do this, and they've completely left the industry. But realistically, and funnily enough, if they can have people or walk into an environment where they have this sort of support system, it'll definitely be a different experience. So yeah, you took me back to a couple of years ago where I went through my own horror story in onboarding, but it's part of the journey. I think that's the best thing about an SDR as well, actually, learning on the job. When you do get on those phone calls, and the managers were brutal, but them customers, that was a whole other experience, right? Because if you mess up on a call, please, up to you.
Yeah. No, their customers were really interesting. So a lot of the time we're speaking to developers, they know so much more about the product, or even they're talking about things that you've never heard of, and like problems that things that they encountered. And it's really interesting. The company I joined is it was an operating system, and everyone and anyone can use the operating system for free. And the product and service we were offering was really specific, so we would get calls because we would pick up, inbound calls as well. So when you get inbound calls, I think that was more challenging than actually reaching out to specific customers, because they're coming to you with problems that they have, questions that they have, and that you're supposed to know, but it's really technical, and you're like, okay, look, this is not my remit,
for sure.
But articulating was the hardest, because you're just on the phone, you're put on the spot to try and resolve these issues. And a lot of the times, it was customers calling in, and you have to try and support them. So that was the difficult. I think inbound for me over the first few weeks was really difficult, because it was super technical and I just didn't know how to articulate what my role is, how I could support them. That was the hardest part, I think.
Interesting. But yeah, some people think cold calling is probably the hardest or most challenging thing, but I definitely agree with you. When you're qualifying a lead or getting an inbound call, it can be quite daunting when you're going down a rabbit hole and they're asking you questions you have no idea about. So
with cold calling, you're a bit prepared, and you have your questions, you kind of got different avenues to travel. If they say no to this question, what question to ask, like you've kind of got a bit of a flow chart in your head. So inbound for me was a bit challenging at first, because sometimes you'd end an inbound call and be like, damn it, I forgot to ask this question, forgot to qualify that, to qualify that. So that was the challenge for me, getting past all of that.
Amazing. And what sort of tips would you give to people that are starting up their career as an SDR in terms of learning? So personally, I used to record calls from my sales directors so I could listen back on the commute home, stuff like that. Is there anything specific you'd give them in terms of advice? And also, if someone's thinking they're having a bad month or quarter, or thinking of even leaving after 4 weeks like yourself, how would you motivate yourself or keep going? Is there any tips and tricks there as well?
Yeah, so actually so I joined with another guy at the same time, and he left in 4 weeks. And I think, and what I realized is what I was doing and what he wasn't doing was he wasn't pairing up with the inside sales rep, listening to their calls, working with them, even though they were brutal. I'm not going to lie to you. They were brutal. They were telling us, you're giving us crappy leads. You're not good. You don't have to write an email. They were saying stuff like this to me. And I think this affected that individual. Whereas for me, it did affect me, but I worked around it. I had to work even more closely with these guys. And ultimately it worked. I was listening to their calls, what they were doing well, how they were asking questions. So that would be my advice: pairing up with someone a bit senior, someone you're working, the leads that you're giving to, work with that inside sales rep, and they will invite you to their calls with their customers. So have that open forum. I also would say another thing I think be prepared in the sense, know what questions to ask. So for example, have that flow chart in your head. If you ask a question and someone says no to it, don't just crumble. Think of another a question to counteract that answer. I think that always helps, because someone could say no to you and you're like, oh, I didn't prepare for a no. I prepared for some sort of answer. So I think sometimes preparing for a no is is always good, and then so you can figure out what other questions to ask.
Fantastic. Amazing. And then I guess fast track to where you are today in customer success. So we say to everyone who comes through the academy, hopefully you want to have a full-time career in sales and become an AE. But, the beautiful thing about the SDR role, it allows you to, come into a company, learn the product, build a brand, and then potentially move to other departments like marketing, customer success, or even product. So explain to me that transition. How is it similar or dissimilar to the SDR role? For those that are listening, might not know what account management or customer success is. So would love to hear from your side how things have been transitioning in, and maybe just give people a picture to your day-to-day. That'd be amazing.
Sure. So I think I'll start off with what a customer success manager is essentially it's a post-sales role. So essentially like an account manager, but the aim is to essentially make customers successful with the product or service, making sure that they've adopted the product or service, they're using it correctly, and essentially it's about relationships, building relationships, and making sure that ultimately they don't churn, that they renew their contract. And how that transition happened from an SDR to customer success manager was,
I love this story.
Yeah,
on Fridays.
Yeah,
really love it.
It was quite random, but also, I just felt like it was something that had to happen at the company I was working at. Being an SDR, obviously you're taking in inbound calls, and a lot of the time it was customers calling in, and I just felt like that the customers weren't being supported. They didn't really know who to call. They just had this general number to reach out to. They didn't have a dedicated person, and I just felt like that wasn't good enough. And then I sort of brought up these conversations with my manager, internally with my other SDRs, and then ultimately one day I sort of just kind of had that conversation with the CEO one time, and it just kind of sparked a conversation of what is customer success, and he asked me to send an email of like, send me what your proposed strategy for customer success would look like. And I was like, I don't know if this is a trick question. I didn't really know if this was a trick to be like, she's stepping over some toes or something. So I did send it, and he didn't actually respond to my email for a long time, until one of my fellow SDRs was like, just give them a nudge. And I did, and he responded. I thought it was a really great idea. Customer success in general was becoming a big thing around that time, a few years ago. And then he sort of said, why don't you work with your manager, who was the SDR manager, and he was the VP of marketing, to sort of come up with a customer success strategy, and sort of build something. And we had sort of a 3 months period to build something, and then 3 to 6 month period to build something, test things out, work with customers, see if they really liked having a CSM. And we did, and we saw, and that it was a bit different to a traditional CSM. It was, I was trying, at the time, it was more, account management, where I was trying to get upsells, seeing if having a post-sales person would affect the customer. Would they be willing to upsell? Looking at usage data, reaching out to the customer, would that make a difference? And it did, and we saw some upsell opportunities. So that was really amazing. And then we came into a position where we were able to then articulate what customer success was to the company, and I was able to lead that presentation. So it was really good. And now that I left, so I left that company after a few months of delivering that presentation, because I felt like I kind of did what I wanted to do. I kind of wanted to push customer success into this company. I just didn't feel like there was enough growth opportunities or people internally supporting the customer success movement. And I'm all about teamwork. I just didn't feel like I was being supported with that. So I decided eventually to leave. But now that company, they have a fully fledged customer success team. It's like they've seen the importance of customer success. So I'm happy that I did something for them to realize that customer success is important. So how I transitioned, and for an SDR who's thinking about transitioning to an account executive, moving into marketing, customer success, I think really just when you get to a position when you're like, my time being an SDR is kind of up now. I want to figure out doing other things. I think really talk internally, you know, talk with your teams, tell them you're interested. I'm interested in marketing. I'm interested in customer success. I want to be a account executive. And I think that's the difference. I think when you articulate what you want to do, why you want to do it, you know, ultimately, especially in a tech world, they want to retain talent. They don't want you to leave. They want you to progress. And especially, I think sales is one of that special, is a special place to be, because they're more than likely to promote people and more likely to push people into different routes. So, and tech in general, they want to retain staff, and you can move into teams everywhere, really. And that's what I'm seeing across the board in the tech industry.
That's epic.
I love that. I was going to say, Jay, it's interesting you say that as well. It's almost like the SDR sort of skills and characteristics that you need to be successful carry you everywhere, whether it's a promotion, whether it's moving in a different job. It's the very same things that you do every day. You need them. But one thing else that sort of stood out to me, you mentioned that you felt as if the environment wasn't really an environment that you could grow and progress. And that's another massive thing, right? When you're looking to move into a role. What constitutes as an environment for growth or for progression for you? What does that environment look like? And what advice would you give to people that may find themselves in an environment where they don't feel like they've got any room to grow?
Yeah, I think when it comes to the culture and environment in general, I think it's really important to be in an environment where, you know, growth and talent is appreciated. You know, when people share ideas, be it creative, if they're just their curiosity, if there's a space where people are they're allowed to share that, and you know, there's no, you know, jealousy or, you know, weird vibes coming your way, then I think that's an environment you kind of want to be in. But if it's an environment like that where, you know, you don't feel like you can openly express things without getting so many comments that aren't very helpful, I think that's not an environment you want to, you know, continue working in. So I think really it's really understanding the people around you. Are they supportive? Are they hearing you out when you have things to say? I think that's important to pick up on. But, you know, sometimes you've got to also just, you know, ride the wave. You know, sometimes people are a learning experience. You know, you might think, you know, off the bat, this environment's not for me. But as an individual, you have to try and see if you can change that environment. And if it gets to a point where, you know, you tried and it's not changing for you, then you can look elsewhere. But I think, you know, ultimately sometimes you being vocal about why something isn't working to your colleagues, to your manager, is very important. And I feel like I wasn't very vocal at the beginning, and it kind of left some, you know, problems between me and my manager where I couldn't articulate, because he felt like I was annoyed, but I wasn't articulating that with him. You weren't
communicating it. Yeah,
I wasn't communicating that with him.
I think there's so many learnings from that. And even you mentioned like weird vibes. We always say to people, trust your gut, trust your instinct internally. Because if it's not the right setup, maybe it's time to move on. But as you mentioned, it's worth being persistent and writing it out and seeing if things change, but also communicating up front could make a massive difference, right? Because I've even had that situation before where you think you're leaving something on the table by not vocalizing your internal setup. But by doing so, you realize actually things can move in the direction you want them to move. So yeah, that's great. And I guess, as Johnny mentioned, key learnings are communication, which is key as an SDR internally, and also when you're speaking to prospects, but also having you know, some level of grit to withstand certain storms. And I think
also lean on your teammates. So I was telling Johnny, lean on the other SDRs in your team, because there's going to be someone. I was telling the guys, there's going to be someone that's better than you in prospecting, better than you at cold calling. There's going to be someone in the team that knows how to do something better than you. And I think, you know, leaning on them, working with them, you know, it's not an individualistic role. I think, you know, you're going to be the best if you're able to work as a team and with your teammates. So that's what I was trying to push the message to the guys there.
No, you did.
Important.
And you pushed it well. And you know another thing as well, what that requires, it does require a certain level of humility. And
Yes.
especially for myself, one of the things that the SDR roles exposed for me was weaknesses in my own character and personality, because that's the first step. Like when you can sit in front of the mirror and be like, actually, I don't really communicate that clearly. I don't really, articulate myself that transparently and clearly as well. And maybe I need to work on this. Maybe I need to work on this. And I think that sense of sort of reflection, self-reflection to begin with, and identifying what you need help with, what you don't, what you may be good at, and what you can help other people with, and then going into an environment, it becomes a lot easier to communicate, right? Because I always say sometimes you have people that make a lot of noise, but they're not really saying anything. And you
Yeah.
want to be somebody that doesn't speak often, but when you do speak, you're speaking about something that's quite substantial and helpful and valuable, right? So I appreciate that. Big learning
No,
from that.
I can absolutely resonate with that. And I think with me specifically, I realized early on that, I just didn't know how to communicate effectively with my manager, and that was causing a problem between me and my manager. And then there's people in the team that were effectively could communicate with their manager really well, and then there was instances where you kind of figure out how to approach managers. There was one time I had a sort of discussion with the team, informal discussion, your friends, and we had a conversation about commission, and our commission plans were wildly different. So I had a wildly different commission plan to my teammates, and they had the same, and I had to have that conversation with my manager. And when I did, the response was not great. It was not a good response from my manager, and it caused problems because I felt like I was being honest and they were being dishonest by telling me, no, you're getting the same as everyone else, when we can clearly see the maths is not adding up.
That sounds hectic.
So I think having a good relationship with your team will really help you understand, your environment, and then also understanding how to communicate with people better. Because after that situation, then I found a better way to communicate with my manager instead of just, going guns blazing and asking why do I have a different plan to
I relate with that so much.
Yeah.
I relate with that so much. But that's part of it, right? It's the learning experience, the learning journey. And it's crazy because I think the relationships that you have internally and the dynamics that you have with your team, it does then rub off on the clients as well. Because if you're feeling in that mood and you're frustrated and you're like, I'm not even getting paid enough, you could be on the phone, and I know it happened to me for sure, could be on the phone, someone says no, and you could really probably push it a little bit more and be like, you know what, let's put, and like, yeah, no problem, and you hang up. So if like one thing happening, it's like a domino effect. It knock one thing over and then just keeps on going. So I think the internal relationships are crucial to ensuring that you're being your best for the clients as well.
No, absolutely, because ultimately your happiness internally will have an effect on the way you work, and you don't want that. And then it's a spiraling effect, because then it'll get to a point where you're having a conversation with your manager and he's telling you, Maryan, why is your numbers lower this month? And I'm like, well, it's because of this conversation about comp plan. So you don't want to be in that position, so I think being open to have open, healthy conversations is really important.
Definitely. I think the last takeaway would be might not have been in a customer success role if you didn't follow up with your CEO. So following up is key as well.
Yeah.
I knew Jack was going to touch on that.
Being creative, and sometimes I think internally we're a bit scared to tell our opinion of how things can be, how we can improve things, but don't be scared. And I think being an SDR is probably the perfect environment to be open and honest. Because the whole point is collaborative, sharing ideas. How can we get more leads? How can we get more customers? So for me, it was natural for me to say, I think this needs improving, and why it needs improving, because the customers need it, and they'll buy more, and eventually they did. So it's important to do that.
Epic. And then I guess, teamwork, as you mentioned, is absolute key. This is sales and sports. So just touching on really quickly about the sports elements, from a personal perspective, have you seen many crossovers from sports to sales? And yourself, do you follow sport. I mean, you mentioned earlier you're a bit of a Liverpool fan, so that's not the
No,
reason we got you on the podcast.
I'm a big Liverpool fan, and you can see by just you know the championships they've won. They've just worked so well together, and you know, and the thing about support and tech is it is similar. And sales, ultimately you have a goal of, you know, winning something, and for sales it's winning that customer over. For customer success, even, it's making that customer happy and ultimately for them to buy more from you. And in sport, when you're working as a team, you all have the one goal and one destination. You're ultimately going to win that prize. And I see that across the board. And you know, I think now that I'm working from home and I have access to, you know, being more active and, you know, trying out new sports. Sometimes I do tennis, I play tennis, and just having an outlet to go, you know, with my teammate, it's always great. But definitely crossovers, sales and tech. I kind of want to know how sports sales works. I think that would be really interesting. I think that would be really fun.
It's funny you touched on tennis. Actually, I used to fancy myself quite a bit back in the day, you know, every summer playing a bit of tennis. But no, I think nostalgic, remembering the good times. But I think even what you said in terms of working together and winning, Jack and I always sort of speak about this because we're really into sports as well. Obviously, you support Liverpool. I don't know why, but besides that, what is the one thing that you'd say in every successful team, whether in sales or sports, what's the one thing that you think, you know what, if a team hasn't got this, it's impossible to win? Because obviously teamwork, everybody works together. But everybody works together, they don't win anything. But what is the one thing, and you know, you can take a couple of seconds to think about this if you need to, what's the one unique thing that you think every team needs to win, whether in sports or sales, corporate sales?
You know, I think it's passion. I think passion really is a key differentiator between the teams that do well and the teams that don't do well.
Yeah.
I think, you know, I really saw that in the SDR team I was working with. I think when it was just, there was about 6 of us, and it was just like, we all had the passion, we all had the drive really early on. Like, we were, as a team, we were all going places. Everyone in the team was doing well. So that's what I can resonate with. But then when there's a sort of a deflation in motivation and deflation in passion, you're really seeing that everyone across the board isn't doing well, not just you. So I think, you know, if you're that person in the team that can spark motivation, that can spark something, I think, you know, it's worth you being that person and living up to it, because, you know, it will change your game and it will change everyone else's game ultimately. So I think I love that. That's important.
I love that so much, because I resonate with that so much. Like, I've seen that myself, and yeah, I think, but it goes back to what we spoke about earlier when we said you have to know your own strengths and sort of, and what you can bring to the table, and then double down on it. But passion is a massive one, right? If you're not feeling what you're doing, and if you're not passionate about what you're doing, there's simply people that may have a similar ability, similar resources, and the one thing that could tip them over the edge to go the extra mile, like you said, is the passion. So appreciate that answer. Jay, what do you think about that?
I think passion's amazing. Obviously, being a Liverpool fan, we're probably the most passionate fans in the world.
We're super passionate, aren't we?
Yeah, but it sounds like your sort of explanation about giving off that energy, being that box-to-box player, you're going to lift your teammates, being that sort of influence on the field, wearing that captain's armband. If you're an SDR, doing that really rubs off on other people.
I agree. I think in my position as SDR, I saw myself as a really supportive SDR, the person that someone would go to if they really had a question about the process. So I noticed that new team members would always come to me to be like, Maryan, how do I do that? How do I do that? How do I do that? And I think out of everyone, they probably felt I was the most comfortable to go up to and ask those questions. So everyone plays a part in the team. At the time, I was that supportive person. And, you know, for most people, I probably was like the person that helped them the most, you know, feel comfortable, you know, enrolling into the SDR team. So that was really nice. And then there's other people who had other great roles. You know, someone was really good at, you know, writing emails, prospecting. They would go to them, and ultimately you've created a team by just everyone having their position, like, you know, positions in football, but then ultimately they come together. So it's always good.
It's almost like you'd already started being a customer success manager when in an SDR team.
Yeah, no,
and
exactly.
It's funny because I was big into partnership as well from early on. I was working the African market remotely, and from that, you had to really establish quite strong partnerships to make sure that the partners are doing your selling on the ground. And that was whilst I was in the SDR team. So what I'm trying to say, it's like, don't underestimate the role or the things you're doing as an SDR, because essentially you could be practicing and training for the leadership role that you eventually want. I think some people get discouraged when in an SDR team and they start to think, well, I'm not where I want to be, so I'm just going to give up, and they start to let bad habits like sort of take over. But I think everything you do in an SDR team, every single thing you do in an SDR team has a massive impact to where you eventually end up in the role you then end up having.
Absolutely. And the achievements you make as an SDR are so profound that, you know, for example, you could create a campaign. You know, you thought about a creative campaign of how to get more leads, or, you know, turn MQLs into SQLs. If you were the owner of that campaign, moving into a different role, or you bargaining with inside the company and saying, I want to be an account executive. The reason why I created this campaign, and look how many, you know, SQLs I created, or outbound leads I did, and you could that's your bargaining chip to moving up into you know, an account executive place. Or even in marketing, you could say, I've noticed that these MQLs, they all follow up there's a pattern, and we need to be pushing content that reflects this pattern. And then that could be your bargaining chip to get into marketing. So there's so many areas you can
massive. I love that.
Into.
I love it.
Love it. Just quickly before we wrap, I guess from a personal standpoint, just thank you so much for joining. Would love to know, you know, finally, what's next for you in the tech space? Where do you see yourself in the next couple of years, and what's on the agenda? What have you got planned?
Yeah, so I think that's a really interesting question, because I really enjoy being a customer success manager, and I think the company I'm in now, DevOps role, is there's a lot of consultancy aspects to it. So telling people how they should, you know, release things into production, stuff like that. I'm really enjoying that consultancy aspect. So potentially being a consultant one day, you know, at one of these, you know, Capgemini, Accenture places, who knows, or even just, you know, utilizing my organization skills, maybe moving to the project management world, but who knows. But then people do tell me I would be a good manager, so I don't know. I could be managing people, you know, who knows, supporting them. So there's so many avenues to take.
I'll have to agree. And, you know, from Friday's call, you never know, maybe a motivational speaker could squeeze in there as well, because the cohort really enjoyed it. And you know what? I know a few of them are looking forward to the podcast, because we've spoken. I've mentioned that we're going to do a podcast with yourself, so I'm sure they're going to be running to this one as soon as it's out. But it's really interesting. I think it's been a pleasure sort of working together with yourself over the last week or so. Hopefully we can have many more sort of meetings in the future and stuff like that. But keep inspiring, keep going, keep pushing yourself, keep challenging yourself. And I'm sure that we'll sort of bring you in again when we need some more support and motivation.
No worries. Well, I think what you guys are doing is so amazing. If I had, you know, someone like you guys at the start of my SDR journey, I think it would have helped me, you know, identify where I wanted to be earlier, but also that support around, you know, I think the onboarding and ramp up can be really difficult for an SDR. So having you guys to really get people prepared before they're thrown into the deep end is so important. So I'm just glad that there's a platform for you guys out there. So it's really good.
Thank you.
Love it. Well, thanks so much, Maryan. Johnny, again, it's been a pleasure. And yeah, we'll circle back next week.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Take care. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Ciao.